Good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning. I am excuse me, I am recording. It is 5:30 on a Monday morning, and this morning we have a penguin to draw. This is one of about 400 toys that I have in a toy box that I call the Random Object Randomogrifier. And every morning we draw, every morning we pull, which we could also say we draw, a random object out of the Random Object Randomogrifier, and we draw it. We draw a toy to draw it. Yes, that's what we do. And today we have a penguin. It is an unbolt penguin. You can tell that by its swirly marking above its head, above its eye, and around its eye, and the markings on its beak, and the fact that on the bottom of it it says unbolt. I got this particular toy from the Houston Zoo. It is not, I don't believe it is a safari toy. It doesn't say safari on it anywhere, so I don't believe it's safari. So it will lack some biological accuracy, unlike the safari toys, which are highly accurate. Safari, if you're listening, call me. I don't know why I think that's so funny. Anyway, this particular penguin I got from the Houston Zoo when they opened their Galapagos exhibit. Which is really nice. If you've never been to the Houston Zoo, the only problem I have with the Houston Zoo is it's landlocked. It's down in the medical district, and they're surrounded by hospitals and Memorial Airmen Park, and that makes it where they can't. They want to expand the animal pens and make them more up to date, but they can't. They can't really do it because they don't have the land. Like the Oklahoma City Zoo has Lincoln Park, has both sides of the lake, and was able to expand and accommodate more animals and more up-to-date displays for the animals. And so, it's just a bigger zoo. And that's where I grew up, and that's where I took all the kids when they were little. So much so that they all have the zoo memorized. They can tell you, to this day, they can tell you where everything is in the zoo, the map. They have a mental map of where everything is in the zoo. But they're getting to where they have a pretty good idea with the Houston Zoo also, because we are members and we go quite frequently. Love me some zoo. This thing is really just kind of torpedo shaped, so the composition phase went really fast. Watching the documentaries about penguins in general, the evolution of penguins in general, and then specifically the Humboldt penguin. pretty neat. Some of the features of their anatomy and how they adapted to life underwater. Because you know that's not normal for things that fly. But they gave up flight. And we start in the documentaries. They were explaining their closest living relatives. They're not truly penguins. None of the penguins alive today are truly penguins. The actual penguins are extinct. Actual penguins, the first birds that were given the name penguin, were very closely related to those little black and white beach birds. I forget what they're called. Pippins or something. I don't know. They're little black and white birds with bright red or orange beaks and feet. But that's the actual penguin, and the actual penguin went extinct because we used it for feathers. We used its feathers for pillows and beds, believing that it was never ever, we can't ever run out of something. How can you run out of something? There's always more. That's the definition of more. That's the very definition of more. More. That was how they explained it on the television series Dinosaurs. Of course there's more. That's the definition of more. More. But they're similarly marked to the original penguins, and so they were erroneously given the same name. Head's too big. I'm having difficulty not making that beak into a duckbill. Anyway, they were erroneously given the same name as penguins, but they are not actual penguins. These cats and all modern penguins are more closely related to albatross. Than to those other birds that I was talking about that I can't remember the name of. Which is, I mean, kind of wild because these are the worst flyers in the world. Cannot fly at all. In one of the documentaries I watched, he made the comment that these are the worst flyers in the world, and their closest living relative is one of the best flyers in the world. Because the albatross will stay afloat in the sky days, weeks, and months, even years, without landing. And they fly long, long, long ways, and they fly very, very well. How did the penguins do that? And the argument is that right after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, there was an abundance of fish. All of a sudden, there was an abundance of underwater food, and that's the only place where the food was. These guys developed on New Zealand, and then moved to Antarctica. And there was no competition for land. There was no predation. They got really, really big. The first ones were 6-7 feet tall. Some of the first ones are 6 or 7 feet tall. Not all of the first ones are 6 or 7 feet tall. We have the coloration down. Now we need to work on the form shading. Those feet. So they filled the niche of all of the underwater dinosaurs. You know, and they always say this, and I don't really understand this part. I get why all of the land dinosaurs died after the comet. If that's your argument, a comet fell and killed all the non-avian dinosaurs, and the avian dinosaurs then were able to take over, and there were mammals. They were just very small, and they had to get bigger to fill in the niche that the dinosaurs left when the dinosaurs died. So I kind of get that, but what I don't understand is if all of the sea dinosaurs, why did all the sea dinosaurs die? Sharks didn't die. The whales hadn't started evolving yet, but the sharks didn't die. The jellyfish and the octopus didn't die. Why was it only the underwater dinosaurs? that left the niche open for our little penguin friends to give up flight and take over that that particular expertise. And I've always been curious about that kind of stuff. Thanks for reminding me about the music, Mom. My mom's in the chat room asking me if I'm recording and if I have music going. I did not have the music going. I am recording, but I did not have the music going. By the way, in answer to your question yesterday, yes, or day before yesterday, yes, squirrels are rodentia. I forgot to mention that yesterday. I thought that they were immediately, but then I thought, you know, I've made some mistakes here recently. Let's get this cleared up. They think they're related to the albatross because they have what they call these tubes on their noses. They have these tube noses. And there's several species of seabirds that have it. Forget what the actual thing is called. But they're the only family of birds that have it. And these penguins do, and the original penguins did not. But at least they're classifying them based on something you can see from a distance instead of like the elephants that we talked about, where they're classifying them based on something you have to look inside their mouth for. How are we doing on time? It's 10. We're all right. So the Humboldt penguins, though, they are not your typical cold weather penguins. These little guys, they need it to be about 70 degrees, somewhere between 60 and 70 degrees. They're happiest at those temperatures, and they spend most of their time in Peru and Chile, all along the western coast of South America. And one of their niche activities is they help spread the guano left by all of the other seabirds. The western beaches of Peru and Chile are situated in such a way that there is practically no natural predation, no rats, no foxes, no nothing. At least there wasn't before we got involved. And so these birds started nesting there along with seals and a few other sea lions rather, and a few other sea-going critters. And they've been doing it for tens of thousands of years. And because of that, there is an entire beach made of guano. And the Incas used that guano to fertilize their crops. And their descendants were also using that to fertilize their crops when the Spaniards came along. And the Spaniards said, hey, this is a pretty good idea. And started harvesting it, taking it back to Europe. But they didn't start doing that until the 1840s. And by the 1840s, they had pretty big mining up going on along the western coast of Peru and Chile. And they brought with them all the things that mankind brings with them, especially when there's boats involved. They brought rats. They brought rats. They weren't careful. They brought foxes. I don't know how they brought foxes, but the foxes followed soon after into an area where historically there had never been predation. And that started causing problems. But initially they weren't concerned about the penguins because the penguins were pests to the original harvesters, because the penguins make their nests among the piles of guano that they are trying to harvest. They actually burrow into the guano or poop, and they lay their eggs and nest inside the burrow inside the big giant pile of poop. Kept the eggs warm. Penguins were safe from the sea lions and anything else that might eat them. Worked out well that way for tens of thousands of years. Then along come the people. Now here's the beautiful part of that story. They figured it out. The people figured out the relationship. The penguins and the seabirds work together to herd the food to the beaches, and that's what attracts the seabirds to the beaches, is the food. All of the animals there are necessary to keep the food where everybody wants to play along. And so they caught on very early and made it a very important part of their productivity to keep the penguins and the other birds safe. So they started doing stuff like they started walling off where they were mining, as the areas became abandoned, they started walling off the areas that they were mining so they wouldn't disturb the already skittish penguins and seabirds. They started tracking where the penguins, how far out the penguins go and their fishing habits, and they started requiring the fishermen to go further out and to use fishing techniques that didn't ensnare the penguins. And as such, they built up a nice little tourist economy from the people and scientists that want to come see and study the penguins. And I thought, man, that's a happy ending. It's not over. These poor guys, these guys are still on the endangered list, but they're coming back. Mom says she's not much of a traveler, but she would go to Galapagos. I agree. Galapagos sounds like a good time. For some reason the edge of the chat's cut off. I don't know why the edge of the chat's cut off. Galapagos sounds like a really good time. Right up here next to this foot, the shadow is really dark. But by the time you get out here, the shadow is way lighter than the black of the penguin. So it's important to make sure that as I darken in the shadow, I also darken in the blacks on the penguin. Only some areas of this are really black, and those are the areas that are in the shadow and are black. If it's in the shadow and is also black, then it's black. Everything else is kind of charcoal-ish. Anyway, I thought that was interesting that they changed their mining habits. You don't often hear of, and this is going to sound horrible, it's going to sound racist, and it is, because it's how it's presented. You don't often hear of South American cultures actually being concerned about the ecology. You don't hear about that. They don't show that. All you ever hear about is how they exploit the palm industry, about how they exploit the rainforest, that's all you ever hear about. And I think it's important to understand that they are the ones leading the way in the ecology of wildlife on most of these projects. They're the ones that figured out the importance of these animals, not just the penguins, but the sea lions and everything else, to their own well-being. They're the ones that figured it out. Because you're certainly not taught that in the U.S. All you ever hear about in the U.S. is about how those areas are exploited. I think that's a pretty good approximation, drawing, rendering. I think I'm going to live with that one. I do wish these marks around this beak would go away. I can't quite seem to get them to lift. And I know that sounds racist to talk about, but it's like everything else. When you see them, you only ever see them portrayed on movies and stuff stereotypically. You don't ever see them portrayed, not just South Americans, everybody. If you see Texans portrayed on television, you'll see them portrayed riding horse and wearing cowboy hats. If you see Oklahoma portrayed, there'll be Native Americans in Native American dress, and there'll be teepees. New York is going to see somebody getting mugged or shoved. You'll always see in any scene with New York, you'll always see the Statue of Liberty, even though you can only see the Statue of Liberty from one very distinct place in New York. If you see Paris, if they're in France at all, you will see the Eiffel Tower. From anywhere, apparently anywhere in France, you can see the Eiffel Tower. You can always see the dam in the Netherlands. You can always see the Berlin Wall, the remnants of the Berlin Wall. If you're anywhere in Germany, there's the remnants of the Berlin Wall. Russia, anywhere in Russia has that one mosque that's in Moscow. And anytime you talk about South America, you talk about the indigenous peoples exploiting the land. But they're not. They're the ones leading the way for the ecology of the land, and it's important that you understand that. To me, it's important that you understand it. Alright, I'm calling it. What is it? It's 6:03. We're calling it. Today is the 19th. Let's do this, and let's let you compare it to this so you can see. Now that's not quite the angle that I'm looking at the bird, but you can see I think we got a pretty accurate rendering. But I'm going to put it up here, and I'm going to let you see exactly what I saw. We're pretty close to it. This is how I saw it. So it's not much different, but I'm seeing it from my seat. I'm seeing it from just a little bit higher angle. So I'm seeing more of the top of the beak than the side of the beak. I'm seeing more of the pass through the flipper, and more of the top of the feet, and more of the top of the belly. So it's not much different, but there you go, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to this every day. Today is again Monday, and we will be here tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning, because we do this every morning. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel, and then we dance. And we dance until somebody says they see me dancing. By the way, is there anybody under 40 who even gets the same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel reference? Because that's hilarious to me. And let me know in the chat. If you made it this far into the video, let me know in the chat if you're even aware of what that reference is. So anyway, then we dance. We dance till somebody says they see me dancing, and then that way when I cut it off, I won't